Get ready to be inspired by the great things happening in rural education. The Rural Scoop will bring you new ideas and innovative solutions. We'll dive into education issues and we'll highlight what's working in your rural communities. You'll hear from a variety of educators, administrators, professionals, and others who will provide relevant and engaging content in each episode. And now, serving up the scoop, here's your host, Dr. Melissa Sadorf.
Welcome back to the Rural Scoop. I'm your host, Dr. Melissa Sadorf, and today we are going to be talking about how culture and language and leadership are not extras in rural schools. They're the operating system. Today I'm joined by Dr. Jason Cummings, an assistant professor of educational leadership at Montana State University and the program leader for preparing the next generation of principals who will serve in Indigenous and rural communities. Before MSU, Jason led at Crow Agency schools and a variety of others, which we'll talk about, where daily practice meant weaving identity and wellness and mastery into the school day. He's also the co-author of Humanized Education, which was put out by Marzano Resources in 2024. And it's a framework for growth-based, strength-based, and mastery-based learning that's as practical as it is principled. We're going to trace the arc of his work from schoolhouse leadership into university preparation and translate it into some concrete moves that you can use next week on how to humanize discipline, how to design for belonging, and how to measure what matters. So let's get started. Jason, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes, thanks for having me. It's been quite the journey just to connect, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Well, a mutual friend introduced us, and it was a good connection because we do have a lot in common, and I'm excited to be able to talk about it today.
Yeah, what do you want to discuss? That's a tall order that you share with everyone, so hopefully we won't leave anybody disappointed.
Yeah, well, we might need a part two because it's a lot.
Yep.
So why don't we start at the beginning? Let's start, Jason, with what moved you toward educational leadership as a way to serve not only your people and your culture, but those that are in the schoolhouse. And when did you realize that your path was going to be both scholarship and practical application?
Yeah, I will say that the words like career or career trajectory or things like that have never resonated with me. So a lot of that talk was kind of foreign, but growing up with the idea of reciprocity and having a family who, expects you to give back to the community, and having a whole entire community that views education as a way to help the community, to benefit the community, and not just the individual, probably really shaped my thoughts there. And having that feeling of helping community has always been with me. And I attribute that to my family. And growing up and hearing their stories and experiences with them, that's kind of how I thought it should be. So that was the expectation, I guess, placed before me. Very fortunate have the family that I do have. I'm from South Central Montana, from the 𝐄𝐻𝐢𝐬𝐲 Nation. And so that's our region there. And scholars will tell you it's literally one of the last places on the continent to be to experience colonization, with a westward and eastward expansion. And our tribe was very forward thinking. And so there's a lot of intricate and complicated things in our history and alongside U.S. history and other tribes' history. But our tribe has managed to maintain their culture and views and ways of life. We're very fortunate that way. So with that idea of helping the community, I thought, well, education. And if there was a better way, I often say, I would probably be doing that. and me and my brother thought we don't ever want to leave. So we kind of had that as little kids. We don't want to leave. And I think that speaks to our experience too. We've had most I can't speak for all, and it's fine with. I'm not judging anyone who does want to leave, but we used to have teachers who told us, you need an education so you can leave and get out of here.
Yeah.
Well, and obviously those teachers had a deficit-based view of our community. It's like, why would we want to leave? Why would we want to get out of here? This is where we were put, as where we've been put since time immemorial. Why would we want to leave? All the people we know, all the people we love. And so that kind of plays into it as well.
Sure. I appreciate that. That perspective of asset versus deficit lens. And that is something that we struggle with, I think, in a lot of our rural communities. I know that I struggled with it as a superintendent here in Arizona of a rural school district, and people don't realize how much richness there is to our rural places. And when you layer culture on top of that and that identity that you talk about, it is something that people, I don't think, understand very well.
I agree. We need to really rethink and practice reflexivity as educators. What is our perceptions? What are we thinking? Why are we motivated to think this way? And knowing that place is important. Place, and whether it's land-based education. And a lot of times our youth and young people get the message that the city is more important, or their rural area is less than, and that's just not accurate. It really isn't accurate. And so just I think we as educators can build upon that to know that our rural areas are important. Of course, I know that there's challenges in every area you're at, doesn't matter where. And so I often say you don't have to be very smart to see what's missing or see what's wrong. So
True.
Now, wherever we are, we can choose to see what's good or what's lacking. But going through asset identifying activities has definitely helped in practice, seeing what assets we do have in the community. And so that's a part of school leadership too, is changing the culture of the school rather than viewing what we don't have. Let's find, okay, what we do have and what can we build on?
Yeah, definitely. Let's go back to your journey through that chosen field of education. And before we got on, I know that I'd asked you to talk about 𝐄𝐻 Agency, which was, just as you said, one of the places that you've had the experience of working at. Can you talk a little bit about where did you start and how did you end up at MSU? And what did you learn along the way about those things that are a part of your work right now, which is language and identity and wellness, and that really has shaped your leadership practice? Not a small question, I know, but we can start there.
Well, I started at, I graduated from Little Bighorn Tribal College. And so I'm a proud alumni of the tribal college in our community. And then I went on, got my teaching degree. I've taught in private and public schools, been an instructional coach, K-12, been an elementary teacher, sports coach. And then I will say that as a teacher, I've worked in my own communities. Our reservation we have about 7-ish schools. And so I've worked at most of them and just trying to grow and looking for growth. And I was teaching, and I remember being in one school. And as a young teacher, it was always very encouraging when the boss or the principal would say, I'm going to leave you in charge for today. And then this happened so much that I realized, hey, wait, it seems that whenever I'm left in charge, I'm problem solving. And I was actually good at it. I was good at working with different parties and conflict management, and just, I think the community sensed that I really was trying to do well. So I was pretty good at it. And then somebody was like, you're doing all this work. And I did this in a few different schools. And somebody said, you're doing, the principal's job. You need to go to school to be a principal. And so that's how it started. And I went to Montana State, and it was really exciting for me because being exposed to that literature, the leadership literature, I had only ever done that in my spare time. So I was always buying leadership books from the business section at the bookstore, and just reading everything I could because that resonated with me. that gave me a way to view community situations, whether it was government or just sociological, whatever it was. I started to see how leadership plays into just different structures within the community. But then to be in an educational setting where we talked about those principles and practices, it was very exciting. And I thought, this is what I want to do someday. And this is what I want to do someday. And I have a really good mentor, Dr. Bill Ruff. I said, what do you want to do, And I said, I want to do what you're doing. And so he said, I get about 10 years experience and your doctorate degree, and then we'll talk. And got about 20 years experience and degree. And it kind of came full circle. So I've been a superintendent and a principal. So, and served at multiple schools in my community. So I think, and then going into those leadership positions, realizing that we could do things better, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just because we know in education that we often continue the status quo. The way we've experienced school is how we think school is supposed to be, and that's not necessarily the case. So trying to reframe the educational experience, and also trying to tie in Native American community experience as well. I'm a member of the 𝐄𝐻𝐢𝐬𝐸𝐺 Nation, so is my wife Albert and our sons, and that's where we're from, and that's our experience. But just understanding that, I think, and how that plays into schools rather than accepting schools as they are, has helped tremendously in practice. So I don't know if our listeners know too much about the history of the formal education in relation to Native schools. So can I share about that a little?
I think it would be important to lay that foundation. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just in conversation with colleague Kelly Berry. He's a professor in Oklahoma, and a friend named Mason Pasha in Washington with Getting Smart. And we talked about some of the, first Indian schools. And I'm very careful how I phrase that, because Native American communities have always had institutions of learning. We didn't call them institutions, but we had ways of teaching kids and methods of teaching. So when I say that, I mean Western schooling or non-Indian schooling. So, and just understanding that history of Indian schooling and its purpose is really eye-opening.
I would agree.
And from that conversation, Kelly Berry shared with us, like, one of the first Indian schools on this continent took place in what is now known as Mexico. Of course, Mexico is a new construct, right?
Yes.
But with the indigenous people there, there was in the 1500s a boarding school there from missionaries. And then after that, in what is now known as North America, there was a series of schools called the colonial Indian schools, like Black Brafferton or Salem Creek Indian School. 1640 was Harvard Indian School. And the interesting thing was the ideology with all these schools concerning Native people was to eradicate identity. It really was to, quote unquote, what they thought civilizing Native peoples. And these schools happened way before the kind of famous federal boarding schools. So, but they laid the path for the boarding schools. And with the boarding schools, the United States had kind of twin policies, which were Indian assimilation and acquiring Indian lands. So that was the explicit policy, was to acquire Indian lands by separating Indians from the land and assimilating them. And so in the inception, education really was a weaponized process towards Indian people. And so having that colonization and having that complicated history with regards to schooling is it's really deep in the foundations of education in our country towards my community and others like us. And it's really interesting that there was a confidential message in 1803 delivered by Thomas Jefferson to Congress, explaining his the strategy to dispossess Indians from their territories through assimilation and education, and basically saying it'll be more cost effective if we can use schools to acquire Indian lands. So I say all that to say, within like the unspoken assumptions of how we do school or the status quo of school, those tacit assumptions are still present, affect how schools relate to a lot of Native communities, whether it's parent involvement, whether it's expectations, whether it's views on language, views on way of life, because often the school thinks that they know better. And I had a professor once, and he was like, how arrogant for an educator to think they know better for a child than a parent. He wasn't saying that in view of Indian education, but he was just saying, as an educator, don't ever assume to think you care about and love kids more than their parents. But with regards to Indian education, that kind of has been the story. So I'll say just understanding that history and that schools have had an ideology known to like be disparaging towards Indigenous communities needs to be taken into consideration. The foreign mission schools, their ideology was to educate youth from the heathen nations. That was
That's right.
The federal boarding schools, the Henry Pratt, his mission statement, the school's mission statement was kill the Indian, save the man. And it's just a horrendous, it's not cool. I should say that.
Yeah.
Not good.
Agreed.
I think there needs to be like a reframing of education. And I reflect back on my teacher prep program. And there was, I think the assumption was I was going to teach in a school that was, off the reservation, or a school that was serving predominantly middle-class students. And so, for example, they would say, you have to access a student's prior knowledge. But reframe that, and we need to apply that towards Indian communities too. We were taught you have to provide a relevant experience, a relevant education, so students will engage. Yes, let's do that for our Indigenous students too. Let's do that for them. Let's give them a relevant education. Let's give them an education that will help their community, help them heal their community, and nation build for them as well. So why can't we teach tribal government alongside U.S. government? We can. Why can't we teach tribal history alongside U.S. history? We can. So I think that's a lot more engaging for our Native students than being ignored or being absent from the schooling experience. We were meeting with a group one time, a parent group, and getting feedback. And I remember I was just taking the feedback and taking my licks, taking my lickings, and really wanting to hear from the community on how we could do better. And about 3/4 way through the meeting, and a grandmother said, "What kind of meeting is this anyway?" I'm like, "Well, I'm gathering feedback, so to inform how we conduct school." And the grandmother was surprised and said, usually this meeting is all the school people are just defensive and we're dismissed. But and so that was eye-opening to me too. And somebody at the meeting said, our little kids start out school so hopeful and so excited. And after a few years, they're beat down and they don't want anything to do with school. And so all of that, I think, shaped how I wanted to attempt to do school, because it's always a work in process, right?
Sure.
I wanted to reframe and teach with the community's best interest in mind, with nation building in mind. And so, why do our students should know the difference between fee land and trust land.
Yeah.
And why is it that most of our non-Indigenous students know about that? Because knowledge is power. Why are a lot of our Indigenous families land rich, but not doing well? How did this become that we're being taken advantage of with lease laws and leasing and lease rights? So, and rather than continue that status quo, let's give our students the knowledge they need to live a good life. So, I don't know if I even spoke to your questions, but
you did. And I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into the practical nature of that, because I think it's important, especially for rural leaders that are working in systems that may have Indigenous students in their schools. And
Oh, they do.
some of
They
the
do.
I did as a superintendent. About 20% of my student population was from the Tohono O'odham Reservation.
Wow.
We had a particular district, Sephuatic was our district, and they were our partners, and they needed to be. So what you're talking about is so important, and that decolonial leadership is something that I think a lot of schools might miss. And it's not something that's necessarily taught in principal preparation programs or in teacher preparation programs. And so what does that look like in practice? What are the behaviors that need to be exhibited in order to make schools a more humanizing place and less extractive? And on the way to having that happen, the byproduct is kids still want to go to school, right? Because they see themselves at the school. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I can try. Well, I feel like I'm learning a lot just listening to the question. But I think understanding and being aware of colonialism in our country is a good first step. Like I said before, we've been doing school the way we think it should be done, and it's always been done. But trying to understand what's going on and understanding that it's a myth, like it's a big myth that our schools are culturally neutral. I'm not speaking of like organizational culture, school culture, but dominant culture. Our calendars are based around somebody's culture and worldview. Our school calendars.
Yep.
When the other educators don't have to choose between Christmas and being an educator.
Right.
Right? And they're not given
Yes.
that dilemma, where a lot of our Native American serving schools put the community and educators in that dilemma. So that, as far as decolonizing leadership, I would say there's a lot of really good literature about it, but just understanding the process of colonization, or more specifically in our continent, settler colonialism. So I remember in my undergrad taking Western Civ, and we were learning
Me too.
Yeah. And we had a great instructor, just super engaging, great storyteller. And we were learning about how Great Britain was colonizing all of these other countries. Sorry to my British friends, I'm not. But we were learning about this, right? How they were exploiting resources, exploiting land, all these power structures. And my light bulb went off. The light bulb went off over my head. And I asked the professor, I was like, is this what happened in America to us Indians? That's what I said. Somebody will say, don't say Indian, but yeah. And he stopped and paused and he kept teaching. And I asked, I said, is this what happened in our country, us Native Americans, us? And I always remember he wouldn't answer.
Interesting.
Just went on with his lesson, but it was really easy for us as a school or as a class to look at what was going on in other countries in regard to colonialism. But back then, it was never addressed to our own story,
right,
in America. And so, and just understanding that, and schools, I think, should be humanizing, and kids are not just test scores. Kids are not just data points, and we have a sacred responsibility and a sacred trust to help our students, right? And I want to say, like, approximately 90% of Native American schools go to Native American students go to public schools, and about 24% of all Native American schools attend rural schools. And so Native American kids, their attendance of rural schools is like 2.5 times higher than any other demographic. And so I would say with decolonizing leadership, the first step is aware and not continuing the assimilative colonization process.
Right.
Having thoughts such as English only in this school. That might be a little radical. You can edit that out, but
No, I think it's important because
So like,
many of those children are losing their language.
and that was by design, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And it continues to be a problem. So yeah, I don't think that's worth editing out. I think it's worth keeping.
No, I say that because
their identity.
we were a part of some language revitalization work, and I've been fortunate. I can't take credit alone for a lot of good stuff, good projects we've been a part of, but a lot of great Indigenous teachers I've been able to work alongside of. But we had a full immersion model, a dual immersion model, conversational plains language model, all within our public school.
Wow, that's impressive.
And so in a public school, we're meeting state standards, we're meeting national standards. Our kids who were in the dual language model of class, we had a cohort. That's the word I'm searching for, cohort. They started achieving higher than the English-only cohort. And science says multilingualism gives you stronger and more flexible cognitive functions. In the long run, you'll make more money.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of benefits to multilingualism. But I've said, we're doing all this great work. And then we had a staff member who would say things like that. I think it should be English only in schools. And like, you know that like 98% of our kids are Native American, right? And you know you're working on the reservation, right? That's just my opinion. And I said, yeah, that's fine. And then I had another educator, and this was shocking to me, great educator. I'm not even saying anything disparaging, but towards the end of the school year, just said to me, you know what? I hate your language. I hate the Indian language. Hate. He said hate. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? I just don't like hearing people talk the language. It should only be English here at this school. And I was really surprised. And then I was like, dude, you're not even American.
Wow.
So he wasn't an American teacher, but that he still had this views of how schools should be in relation to Indian communities.
How interesting.
And I've had teachers and educators say, well, if they want to be successful in the real world, and I'm like, we live in the real world. What world are we referring to?
Mm-hmm.
But it's just that language of trying to delegitimize the Native experience and
Yes.
saying, we want you to leave that and go, you know what I'm trying to communicate?
Yes. Yes.
I hope it's coming across clear, but it is very important that we don't continue these old efforts to try to dislocate Natives from their land, if that makes sense. And that's a part of decolonizing.
Yep.
School leadership. And there is going on the practical level, different funding sources. And I will say this, Indians do not get free money. It's so irksome when people think that in today's day and age. But tribal leaders in their foresight did negotiate on a nation-to-nation relationship with the United States, a lot of times land in exchange for educational benefits.
Yep.
And so sometimes people will say Natives don't pay the mill levy tax. Well, that's just land the state couldn't steal. So it's like, and I'm saying this humorously, but it's like the state saying, we're so mad we can't tax land that's not ours. They're not mad, but that's kind of what,
right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so if Native Americans go to public schools on land in trust or land that's been negotiated with the state or the federal government, the feds have often inferred that those are treaty rights, and they'll step in and pay what those individuals are not paying a mill levy. And so that's like your impact aid funding. There's also funding sources such as Johnson O'Malley funding.
Yep.
There's, depending on your state, in my state, there's like the Indian Achievement funding. There's the Indian for All funding. And so that's
Title
like
VI.
Title VI funding. So for a Native student, there's like maybe 5 to 7 sources of funding for that one Native student versus a non-Indian student. So you want Native students in your school, but we want you to do right by them. Because with Title VI funding, for example, you have to consult with tribes.
That's right. You have a parent action group, a committee that meets. Yeah.
And you should be listening to Indigenous voice and not just checking boxes to get money, right?
That's right. That's right.
We should listen to the community, get their feedback and input on how we're doing school and improve the school for the community, rather than just showing the feds that, hey, we had a meeting, here's the sign-in sheet, here's the advertisement. Right. And then reporting back to the parents what we've done. No, we need to take their input before the meeting. And so that's big, because I think a lot of times there's been a disregard towards Native families, which is disrespectful. That there's a complaint, there's no parental involvement, but oftentimes it's not a sincere one, because when parents do want to get involved, often they're met with barriers. So we need to eliminate those barriers. Which remind me, we had for example, we had an IEP meeting, and we knew that the caregiver was English. English was their second language. Mm-hmm. We had our special ed teacher speak in the 𝐿𝐵𝐺𝐻𝑒𝐿𝐵 language, and then translate. Perfect. And then translate to the non-Crow speaking teacher. And the grandmother was just excited, talking about student strengths, talking about concerns, and just, it was like the most lively and engaging. And for one thing, we avoided all of the educational acronyms that we're horribly known for, right?
We're terrible about jargon.
Yeah, all the jargon. But and grandma and we were able to, it was just a good meeting. And grandma said, this is the best meeting I've ever had at the school. And on the flip side, I remember once at a school board meeting when the native language was present, that the non-native speakers were so upset. I'm like, well, why are you upset? Nobody's talking about you. And so the language is very important. It's protected by federal law. And I'm sure if there's any native listeners, they probably have a lot of stories about their experiences with the language with regards to school.
Yeah. Very important conversation. Thank you for going in that direction. I want to shift, Jason, and talk a little bit about the book that you wrote, which is Humanized Education. And if you could give us a Cliff Notes version of the framework, the planning, feedback, assessment, and relationship pieces that are in there, so that people know what it is that you are doing with your scholarly work.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. A colleague of mine, Dr. Mike Rule, and we go way back to grad school. Not to date ourselves, but he is one of the nation's foremost experts with regards to mastery-based learning or proficiency-based learning. And so that's really his wheelhouse. And my wheelhouse is strength-based learning, growth-based learning. And we have our other co-authors too, and associates working with us on the book. And that's it in the background there. I can grab it if you want.
Love it.
Libby Child, and let me grab it really quick. Yeah.
That way people know what it looks like so they can go to the store and get it or order it on Amazon. Perfect.
So, Libby Child, Danielle Dickey, and that's the book there. And so we're very part of the work. It is, I want to say, an extension of the school wellness wheel. And it's really just a call to rethink schools, to do what's right for students. And it's one of the few works that actually present in a palatable framework, utilizes what we know about brain research, neuroscience, trauma-informed education, growth-based education, culturally responsive education, and mastery-based. So it's a unified framework. Because if we're honest, all of us learned about the zone of proximal development, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But when you're in the field, how often do you get to practice that? So this gives us a way to practice what we know works within research. And it's not a big book, but it's dense in like 26 pages of references. So it's research-based, and it's just really an exciting work. And the framework is a mastery-based learning, strength-based learning, and growth-based learning. So find the strengths within your community and your individual students and I'm building upon that rather than looking at deficits. What are the strengths? An example is if you are from a community that maybe, and I'm just making something up, okay, has a rich mining history, let's build on that. And this is our community. We have work ethic. We got, whatever you call it. This is who we are. And then binding that with the school culture. Hey, this is who we are. So we want you to continue to put forth effort because then you're going to reap what you sow. Learning takes work. So that's an example. And rather than using culture as a barrier, which we do when we pretend culture doesn't exist, and let's utilize it for the benefit of our students.
Yeah.
And then thinking about mental fitness as well. So the metaphor is like the gym doesn't benefit just those who are out of shape. The gym is going to benefit you if you're already healthy and in shape. And so mental health practices and mental strength practices and approaches benefit all students. And a vicarious benefit is it benefits our staffs too.
Good point.
Yeah, when we provide training on dealing with stress or mindfulness or awareness, or just these trauma-informed practices, restorative practices with our staff to work with our schools, rather than our staff benefits. Our staff learns how to take care of themselves. And I was visiting with somebody I previously worked with about 10 years ago, and he said, "Remember all those teachings that we went through about working with students?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "I'll tell you, that's benefited me as an adult." And he said, "I just want to tell you that." And he said, it's helped me as a parent, as a husband. And so when we provide our teachers with these training, it helps them take care of themselves. And so I could go on and on about it, but it is a really exciting work. It works. It's an exciting work, like in inner city New York, California. It's just all over. It's taken off. And I will say it was also, I think, timely to in our country because the whole world has been through a big shock. The pandemic a few years ago. And we did rethink a lot of things, I think, as individuals, like what's important, why are we doing what we're doing? We were forced to leave our routines, and educationally as well, we were forced to leave our routines.
Yep.
And rather than waiting for things to go back to normal, it's like, no, we're going to make things better. Because what we were doing before was failing a lot of our students, like with regards to discipline. 21% of Indian kids have been suspended at least once in their life as compared to 12% of white students. And we know that punitive discipline has racial undertones. And we don't want to be feeding the school to prison pipeline in our Indian communities. In our state, we had the disparate discipline report in our state. And it was shocking to see that the student that public schools called law enforcement most on was our Indigenous females.
Interesting.
Right? Like almost like our students that are marginalized and our students that need support and protection often don't get that. And I wonder, I'm just theorizing. And I can only think back on my own school experience, but I wonder if and I'm just leaving that subject and thinking about student discipline, but there is different approaches to working with students from tribal communities versus non-tribal.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that.
I think in tribal communities, a student is treated as a fully human being for the most part, rather than less than. And that's from my research, though, interviewing a lot of people. And so that, for example, a 7-year-old might be posed the question, where do you want to go to school next year? And the 7-year-old's able to pick where the first grade. That happens. And so they're viewed as just younger humans who are learning, and they're going to make mistakes and figure things out. And so there's a bit more patience and a bit more understanding. So I can't speak for all tribes, but each tribe has their own approach to that. But I will say there's that humanized connectivity towards students rather than, and a different, probably definition of respect. And I'm just kind of shooting at the wind right here because I think a lot of times in our school systems, respect is only defined as compliance.
That's a very good point.
So compliance and dominance. But, and I don't think, maybe that's not working for us. Maybe we need more tools in our tool belt. And that's not to say we should accept a delinquent behavior. Because I think a lot of times in growth-based approaches, we go overboard and we're just accepting all sorts of incidents, and that's not what it's about. And we can no longer assume students, and we shouldn't have assumed students knew what was expected of them in schools. Like, we have to teach students, right?
Yes.
And we can never say this 5-year-old is disrespectful. They're 5. They don't know how to be disrespectful.
Right. Yeah. Now, 25, sure.
Yeah.
5, no.
But I will say that we can definitely be more culturally responsive and appropriate and build more bridges for our students, engage them in school. And so I know that's saying a lot.
All important. And it also, it makes me wonder, because you and I both teach in university systems and we're preparing leaders. And so let's jump into that. What kinds of things do we need to make sure that we're preparing those either currently leaders that are going back and getting another degree, or maybe they're a prep program for principalship? What are those things that need to be included so that the kinds of conversations that we're having right now are things that are happening in their school buildings or in their communities, or that they're being responsive to the needs of all of the people that make up that school community? What things do we need to be thinking about as educators preparing that next generation of leaders?
Well, what's our purpose? Right? What's our purpose? Was the buzzword? What's our why?
Yeah.
But like, literally, what is our purpose? And there's a school vision. Dust it off and take it off the shelf. And what does that mean? Where did it come from? And I think in most school visions and most schools, our purpose is to prepare students, to get them ready. And I know there's fancy language a lot of people use, but in my mind, I've always thought, okay, I want the students to live a good life on this earth. What skills can we give them so they can live a good life? And how does each teacher play into that and the skills they're teaching? Sure, there might be just, whatever grade level, but that plays into what we're doing as an organization for our students. And we don't want to continue the weaponization of schools towards Indian kids or any kid, right? We want to address gaps in income, whether the families from that side of the tracks or this, we want to provide a good education. So, and at the same time, I think with school leaders, I would say for them to take care of themselves.
Yeah, definitely. I think we found that to be so important, especially to your point about the pandemic. I think it just exposed that a lot of people just put themselves on the back burner to take care of everybody else. And there's that saying, you can't fill everyone else up if your cup is empty.
Yep. That's true. Take care of ourselves, but not be extreme and overindulgent. It's not what we're talking about when we say take care of ourselves. But so do in our inner life as a leader, what are we here for? And how do we see schools? And just having that reflexivity of how do I see schools? In one book, I remember in the introduction, there was one of the authors was talking about their experience working in an Alaska village. And I think it was the principal or superintendent would continually refer to themselves as the general, understanding that view. And a lot of times schools view themselves in relation to the community as us and them. be that way, right? We're serving the community students, and it's not easy. I understand that it's not easy, and we do have our organizational structures so that we can maintain organizational solidity and function, but it's not really us. It is a public serving profession.
Yes.
And we're professional educators. We are professional educators. So that's some of the things I think.
We have preparation programs that do a lot of different things. I mean, what I might teach in my Foundations of Education class might be different than what you're teaching. And a lot of that has to do with the place that we live. And yet there are a lot of our candidates for leadership that are going to be serving in Indigenous communities or are going to be serving in rural systems. What are the things that you've seen done or that you have done yourself that really help prepare those leaders for those kinds of leadership roles?
I think one big thing is being teachable. Sure, you're the leader. You have to have some confidence in what you're doing, and that's fine. But you still need to be teachable and having what is known as cultural humility. Cultural humility. And in my research, a lot of people spoke to the successful school leaders and communities that serve the students they were teachable. And the leaders who failed quickly and came in with a my way or the highway attitude. And a lot of communities are used to educators coming and going. And so just know that the community you serve has been there generations, and they're not leaving. And so also having some commitment to what you're doing in service to the community. Because there's signs when people are just there for a few years and they're going to leave.
Mm-hmm. True, there are.
That's fine, but be an ally where you are there. Really be an ally for the students and the community. And be teachable, have that humility. And I remember, and forgive me, but we have a lot of missionaries that come. And I'm not just saying from one denomination, I'm saying we have a lot in our community that come. And I remember I heard one of the local pastors, and I'm not disparaging missionaries or anything, but one of the local pastors, he said, they're seagulls. And they said, we need more eagles. And then I was like, what do you mean? Because, he said, seagulls come when the weather's nice, but when it gets cold, they leave. And so eagles are here year round. And so for me, I thought about that in relation to educational leaders. And it's like, some come and they're just, it's human nature, right? We want to go elsewhere, but the community needs committed leaders. They need eagles.
I like that. I've not heard that. I might steal that because that is an amazing way to quantify that.
And we've had a lot of it. And a lot of times our kids and our students will ask their teacher, are you coming back next year?
Ooh.
Are you going to be here next year? Because we have and there's a lot, and the teacher shortage is real. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of our institutions have been working towards alleviating that with 2+2 programs and grow your own programs. And there's some really exciting work in our state with the Crow tribe and the Blackfeet tribe. And some of the work they're doing in Montana State University is working towards that too. So.
Can you talk a little bit more about that, Jason? Something that you're working on or that you're aware of as far as a study, and what kinds of things that might have an impact on as far as rural schooling, rural leadership?
Rural schooling and rural leadership?
Whether Indigenous or not? I mean, things that right now are... What are some of the recent studies or articles or topics that you're aware of that you're leaning on, and how might that be translated into practice?
I would say I lean a lot on that. There is some scant and Indigenous leadership research. A lot of leadership towards Indian peoples is historic. Like they'll look at great man theories in the past, chiefs. And then because tribes are so diverse, there's not one way, right? There's not one model. But I think we can learn from protocols. We can learn from different tribal expectations. And so that helps a lot. And there is the special journal between, what was the special journal with the rural educator and?
Yes, the NREA's the rural educator, and we did a special release this last year. What are researchers getting wrong still about Indigenous schooling, or are they? Have you noticed that they're being more thoughtful about how they're approaching their research?
I'm very fortunate to have been just lucked out and met some of my favorite researchers. It's like Susan Faircloth, Dr. Mackey, Alex Redcorn. And there's just within that circle, there's Joseph Martin.
Yeah, he's one of my colleagues at NAU.
And so I'm very lucky to have met some good colleagues. Tippeconic is a good one. But I think outside of that world, where sometimes the mark is missed is when there's no connection. I shouldn't laugh, but I'm involved in some work, and then I remember getting calls one time, and they're like, "Hey, somebody's presenting on this and that. Who is this?" And I was like, "I don't know who it is." Like, did they interview anybody in your organization? And I said, "No."
Oh, interesting.
Well, how are they presenting at this conference based on you and your group's work? I was like, that's academia, and it's not for me to judge. It's just how it is. But so that's kind of sometimes it's gotten wrong. But I've been fortunate to work with some really great scholars, and there's just the learning from so much, and I want to grow more in that aspect as well.
Yeah. Can you talk about what emerging trends or risks or areas of celebration, for that matter, that you see on the horizon for either our students or our school systems, and how we should be preparing for any of that so that we don't get caught not prepared?
Something people are more open-minded about is we are reevaluating our definition of success. We are reevaluating how schools measure success, and understanding that kids are not widgets in a factory.
Yep. And
that in a business model, you can control your input, your process, and hopefully predict your output, but schools are not businesses. We're not businesses, and we work with human beings, and humans are unique, and everybody's different, and everybody comes to the school system with different experiences and different, views and expectations. And so having one measure for all isn't really, helpful.
Yeah.
And so just knowing that the field is changing in regard to that and becoming, I think, a little more understanding of that, but we still need to have measures of success. We're just redefining them and taking human beings into account.
Yeah. Jason, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to make sure that we talk about?
I'm not sure.
Maybe we should have a part 2.
Yeah. Those are really great questions. Really made me think. So thank you for those.
Well, I have one left for you, and that is a question that I ask all my guests. And that is, what does the term rural advantage mean to you?
I think it's a privilege. And I have to disclose that me and my wife and my family, we're privileged rurally, because being close to the family, the land, and it is an advantage. You can there's connections, lifelong connections. Growing up in a rural community, going to school in a rural community, and leading in a rural community, those intangibles of life. There's not so much noise. You can see those important intangibles of life. sometimes a bit more clear than when you're in the hustle and bustle of maybe a different place. That's what it means to me, and I never thought about that before. But
yeah, that's a great answer. I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that.
Always been proud to be a country boy, so... although my family will tell you different. So my wife is from a racehorse family, and all my family is a rodeo family. But
that's a big difference.
Yeah, but I'm the only one who doesn't. In my family, all my brothers are cowboys, and I've never graduated beyond wrestling calves. When we brand, I'm still wrestling calves. Everybody else has climbed the food chain to roping and branding. I'm still wrestling in the mud.
Well, at least you're out there enjoying it, right? Well, I want to thank you for joining me today and really showing us how humanized and culturally grounded leadership is really such an important thing. And as rural leaders, we really need to make sure that we're living that day to day for our students and for our communities. And so I appreciate you bringing forward your perspectives and really your lived experiences.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your invitation. And you're right. We do need to recognize the culture. And a lot of times we think there is no culture, but there is. We're just used to it. Right? And
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Let's look for the copy of the book. If you're interested in more, you can reach out to Marzano. So.
And one more time with the title so that they can make sure that they check it on their list.
Humanized Education.
Thank you so much. And it was just published, so it is a new book on your book list, and I hope that you all pick up a copy and take advantage of at least hearing from one of the authors today. Well, for our listeners, friends, it's my ask if you would just pick one idea from today. Maybe it's a language-affirming opening to a staff meeting or a wellness check when you're doing your walkthroughs, or just a quick audit of belonging signals in your hallways and put it to work this week, next week in your school buildings. And then tell us what happens. If this episode helped you, please make sure that you like the show, subscribe to The Rural Scoop, and leave a comment with your takeaway. And share this conversation with a colleague who cares about language and belonging and student wellness just like you do. Your shares and your reviews help other leaders from rural communities find us, and I read every note. Connect with me on LinkedIn to keep the conversation going. I'm your host, Melissa Sadorf, and make sure that you are continuing to lead into your rural advantage, which is our strength of shared story. When we lead together, we thrive together. I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Rural Scoop. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep these important rural conversations going. And we'd love to hear from you, so feel free to leave a comment or share your thoughts. You can follow along and never miss a new release by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform or by following us on social. We're on YouTube at The Rural Scoop, Instagram at msadorf1, and X at msadorf03. The Rural Scoop is produced with support from Vela Educational Consultants. To learn more, visit velaconsultants.com. See you next time for more great discussions about rural education. And as always, keep leaning in to the rural advantage.